A Maverick.
A Maverick.
A Maverick.
I don't know what you consider a Maverick.
I suppose it's unique.
Different.
Somebody with a touch of genius.
Wild and crazy.
In between outlaw and the Old West.
Supremely self-confident, occasionally misguided, but always interesting.
Either you're a maverick or you're not. That's the way it is. An artist.
Naz is a maverick. I mean, he's the ultimate sporting maverick.
I remember when I was a kid, Muhammad Ali, the older generation all hated him. The kids loved him.
I'm still the greatest of all times.
And I thought that's what we would try and do with Naz.
Oh, gosh, you know I'm the best in the world.
He can be our sort of mini Muhammad Ali.
I'm aiming to be a legend, and I will be.
He was the flashiest.
He was electric.
Cockiest.
He wasn't everybody's cup of tea.
Most confident.
He could be arrogant.
And most brilliant little fighter I've ever seen.
Oh, look at that. Oh, dear, oh, dear.
It was fun. It was electric. There was atmosphere.
The flash brash style, the showmanship, the vault into the ring, the leopard skin trunks, all of those things made him what he was.
People want to be entertained.
He was rock star.
I was too strong, too fast, and too good, and I'm world champ.
He used to intimidate people, he used to wind them up.
You can't get knocked out!
He used to make them take their eye off the ball, lose the game plan.
You've got to be saying I'm great.
He likes hurting people in the ring.
I tell you what, this fellow is a puncher.
I knew there was going to be a stretcher involved somewhere.
Naz did everything he had to do to make sure he won a fight.
I'd put my Naz against anybody else's sporting maverick. And if you had to find 10 points, I know I'm leaving the table the winner.
They were the, original ragamuffin.
His dad was a Yemeni. They came over, I think his dad came over in the 50s, working the steelworks. He lived up the road. They got a corner shop. There was 9 in the family.
His dad, Sal, worked really hard when they had the shop. Naz and brothers slept in various bed combination, bunk beds, double beds, ender beds, on the floor.
Like half dressed in rags he was.
They were poor, they had nothing. But of course the story that all of the sisters and all of the brothers tell is that Naz somehow was the jewel in the crown.
He was just one of them kids who'd torment the life out of everybody who come past, if you could wind them up and torment them. And that's just the kind of character he was, as a little kid. He just drifted in one day and never left.
In 1981, a 7-year-old Naseem Hamed walked through the doors of Brendan Ingall's gym in Winkerbank, Sheffield. It would change both their lives forever.
I'm not a really hard hitter, but I can hit when it comes to people who want to hit.
It was Brendan really who taught him ring craft, how to conduct himself, and gave him really the whole stage on which to perform.
I've heard people say in the past that Naz would have been Naz without Brendan. Well, that's rubbish. It's absolute rubbish.
Naseem Hamed would not have been the fighter that he was without Brendan Ingle. No question about that at all.
It was Brendan that directed him. It was Brendan that shaped him. And it was Brendan that spent years and years of his life creating what we know.
My dad would go into a show in Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle. He'd just get in the back of the car, I can even be getting home at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning.
I'm talking about genuine small, dingy halls in Doncaster, in Mansfield, out at Scarborough, Grimsby, Hull. Small pro shows where Brendan would have a couple of scufflers on.
My dad come back, sat on settee, and it must have been about 11 o'clock at night, and I'm sat there and I looked round and I went, "Where's Naz?"
My brother said, "Where's Naz?" And they'd left him in Manchester because he'd been flying around the event, and they got caught up in it all, and they'd come back without him.
He'd be there and he'd pick up a little bit of everything. And at boxing, Naz, who was always accused of not having a lot of concentration, at boxing, Naz was a student.
I'm all right. Just moving and slipping, hitting, getting out of the way.
Was that your great gift?
Yeah.
Not only was Naz a professor of the sport, he had a knack for it. And Brendan Ingle quickly realised he had a very special talent on his hands.
10 and 11, you know, like the kids just put their heads down and swing kind of thing, but with him, he had more about him, you know, like he could move around.
What stood out about him for me more than anything was his footwork. You know, very good footwork, very good balance.
You see some of the videos of him at 10 and 11. He had his hands down and he was moving. He was one of them kids where he caught your eye because he was doing something different than 99% of the other kids.
Brendan encouraged all of his fighters to have fluid feet and fluid hands. That meant they could go with their left foot first, they could go with their right foot first, they could go backwards, they could go forward, they could have their hands high, they could have their hands low.
He had the movement and he had a bit of razzmatazz about him even at that age.
Nas is something special. I think, you know, within 5 years, I can see him, 6 years, I can see him win an Olympic medal.
Brendan's confidence wasn't misplaced. In 1992, aged 18, Hamed turned professional as a bantamweight and immediately started making waves.
He knocked out some guy in one of his, it might have been his second or third fight. He made this lewd gesture. So we knew, I think then, that there were going to be a few stories around this guy.
Nas was fluid, he was a dancer, that was his whole thing. The one thing about Brendan, and not just the ballroom music that Brendan put on, making them dance, is Brendan wanted them to move. You know, you can win fights with your feet. You're moving, you're on the outskirts of the ring, you're going left, right, back, centre, to the left, to the right, changing feet. He was fluid, he was a dancer. You know, that was a form of boxing ballet.
Me and John used to take him on the pads and we'd have to alternate rounds because he hit you that hard. We used to wear pads but went from your fingers to your forearm. So after a round, you couldn't hold your hands up. So you'd have to switch over. And you tell people that and they say, oh, you're lying. He was the hardest puncher in the gym. Nobody punched harder than him, not at any weight.
He used to call those punches his rocket launchers. He'd hold them up to us. I've always got my rocket launchers, he'd say in his Yorkshire accent.
Brendan Ingle said this is something really special, and I obviously took note of that. And I see him have a couple of pro fights, and I thought, you know, this kid could go places.
The triumvirate of Hamed, Ingle and Warren would catapult Nas into the stratosphere. His swagger was there for all to see, and it was his European bantamweight title bout against Italian Vincenzo Belcastro that caused consternation amongst some of the old guard.
As soon as he went pro, he had instantly had enemies. And he had enemies in the press. Guys who were writing the national newspapers didn't like his style, didn't like what he brought to the table.
They took great exception to him. They said, you know, he's taking the out of the opponent, he shouldn't be doing, you know, this is terrible, I don't like this.
He would regard it as something that was legitimate, I think, at the time. It was part of who he was as a fighter. He always had that slightly contemptuous air about him.
It's a bit like a bull in a matador. You know, the matador, he has the bull turning left and right, tires the bull out, frustrates him, has him going one way than the other, and eventually finishes him off. You know, and that's basically what Nas used to do.
You can be brash and cocky, but if you can't fight, it's no good to you. And the fact was, he could fight a bit. And what he was a good boxer. You know, there's that old expression, you get a handful of rice, if you threw it at him, you wouldn't hit him. He had such great reflexes, such a great eye, such good balance. And Nas in that fight, I mean, he boxed superbly. He never laid a glove on him, and he absolutely took this fella apart.
The officials never, ever liked him. But here's a little thing for you. No official was ever paid to go through the turnstile. The people pay. It's that simple. The officials sit in judgment for nothing.
European bantamweight title holder at just 20 years of age and one of the most charismatic fighters in the country, Frank Warren immediately tapped into the unique appeal of his young fighter.
He had the personality, he had the talent, and he was quite exciting. He was full of himself, but I felt that he needed to be promoted to kids and try and get in so that the youngsters like him, that your parents would get to find out about him. And that was the audience we found for him.
When we used to go to shows, you know, like, and people who got dolled up, you know, with a suit and tie kind of thing, you know, like, and take the wife or whatever, you know, like, it weren't a young crowd, I wouldn't have said, when Nas first started boxing, but, you know, like, he started attracting a younger crowd.
I could talk to him before a fight. I could say to him, you know, this is what I'd like you to do, this is how I want you to do this. And he listened. He was so full of himself, so confident, so brash. And I just thought that, you know, he can be our sort of mini Muhammad Ali.
Very few people have managed to cross over and attract really the non-boxing fans who are just turning up for a sporting event. A bit like a pop concert. And People came to see Naz either to, you know, knock somebody out or get knocked out. He got something about him that people, you know, either liked or hated.
Hamed was beating everyone put in front of him, and his profile was growing at incredible speed. But it wasn't just his boxing skills that were getting people talking.
Everywhere you went, every single show you'd go to, you'd wonder what the entrance would be.
When I went across the sky, then it was then we had a bigger budget, and we started making these more over-the-top, elaborate entrances, which were quite fun.
Most people didn't really care whether he was good or bad, as long as they were entertained.
If you said to me, "It's £1 million, strip off, put a little pair of shorts on, and dance in front of all these people," you'd die of embarrassment at doing it.
As long as he won at the end, they weren't that bothered that he'd got clipped, he'd been dropped, or he hadn't fought correctly, or that he'd been in a fast food restaurant 60 minutes before the first bell.
If Naz hadn't been a boxer, he'd have probably been a singer or something. I think he was just one of them personalities that enjoyed it.
All fans want when they go to a fight in an entrance is they want music they can hear, music they can recognise, and a boxer they can see smiling and snarling and topping it off with a vault. Of course, there was the occasion when he was carried to the ring by the half-naked men. Probably not a good idea, but hey-ho, it was entertaining.
After swatting away bantamweights for fun, Hamed made the step up to featherweight and the WBO crown. It was to be his biggest test as a fighter yet, against Welsh chap Steve Robinson in Robinson's hometown of Cardiff.
Steve wanted more money, and Naz went up to him just before the fight and said to him, "You keep worrying about money, I'll put my purse in an envelope, you put your purse in an envelope, whoever wins keeps the lot." And at that moment, he won the fight.
What a night that was. That really was a poisonous, hostile night. There were 16,000 fans in there. Every single one of them wanted Steve Robinson to do a number on Prince Naseem Hamed.
And they were chucking stuff, spitting at us.
All the guys that would be surrounding him as he walked through the rain to the ring in that spotlight, they looked nervous. One or two members of Naz's family, they looked petrified.
I can remember the whole crowd chanting almost as one, and excuse my language here, they were chanting, "Hamed, Hamed, who the f*** is Hamed?"
And you know what I'm going to say now? The only person that was relaxed was Naz. He didn't give a monkeys.
You know, even walking out, I can remember having a smile on my face and just thinking, in half an hour or an hour, this is going to be over.
And the chatting to Robinson was perfect. How else were you going to break this solid, stolid man?
You could see the frustration in Steve Robinson, and then Steve Robinson would launch into an attack and Naz would clip him, and then Naz would laugh at him.
Did Naz beat Robinson before the first bell? No. But did Naz beat Robinson with more than fists? Absolutely.
He just tormented the life out of him.
Naz that night was supreme because he did it not just in someone's backyard, but I am telling you, that was a lynch mob there that would have gladly arrived at the arena with a rope.
Britain in the mid-90s was the time of Britpop and Cool Britannia. It was the most exciting country in the world. And after that victory over Robinson, Naseem Hamed was a fully paid-up member. One of the most recognisable faces in the country, he even competed with the pop stars he socialised with.
There were moments at certain Naz fights when you'd look around and you'd see people dancing. He was part of something new.
It's no good just going sitting there for 2 or 3 hours watching people knock lumps off each other. You may as well sit outside a pub and watch them do it. Whereas with Naz, It was like being at a pop concert.
David Beckham came, Stephen Henry, the snooker player, and at the side of the ring, just behind me, was all the Oasis sat down with the girlfriends. And then afterwards, they came to the changing room, and Naz introduced him to Brendan. He goes, "Oh, Brendan, this is Oasis, Brendan." He went, "All right, lads, how are you going on?" He had no idea who they were.
Daniel Day-Lewis came to watch him train in New York. You know, like Michael Jackson came to watch him train in New York. Puff Daddy walked him out at one of the fights.
Frank Bruno had the granny appeal. The old ladies liked him. And that's great because it is a crossover. You're bringing not just a boxing audience, you're bringing a general audience. And Naz did that. There was a crossover.
He did bring in couples. He did bring in young people. And you did get stopped in supermarkets by grannies who'd seen you on TV talking about Naz the previous Saturday. And they'd ask you about him. That happened. I'm not inventing it. That happened.
It was a good reaction. It was a mixed reaction. But what they were doing, they were talking about they want to see him. They want to see him get beat or they wanted to see him win, but they wanted to see him.
I don't want to sort of sound like I'm blowing it out of all proportion, but he was rock star.
We got invited to the Yemen by the president and we went out there and, I mean, it was like the Beatles. It was crazy stuff. And they even put him on the stamps. I can remember saying to him, I said, "That's the only time you're going to get licked."
Britain had been conquered. Now America was in Hamed's sights, and a meeting with former WBC champ Kevin Kelly.
I just say, he's right in front of me, and I can honestly tell him that I'm going to knock him spark out.
You will come. You will fall before him. Listen. You will listen to what he has to say. He will not be defeated. Listen, America. You're too late. He's already here. He is here.
Here's a kid, Naseem Hamed, with 100-foot posters in Times Square, with an advert by a sports clothing manufacturer that cost millions to make, that was running on terrestrial TV in the UK. It's Madison Square Garden, it's the home of boxing, it's the spiritual home of boxing, and there's this kid who I'd seen from a 12-year-old at the assembly rooms in Derby.
I remember Naz saying to Kevin Kelly, "Let's entertain everybody. You know, as soon as that bell goes, let's get down to it. You and I, let's have a fight."
It was an absolute thriller.
That was like a fight in a pub, it was.
Naz was on the canvas twice, you know, before he even got into the fight.
That probably was the first time that Naz had probably got a humdinger of a punch.
As soon as he caught Kevin Kelly, it was going to be a finisher. Once he got your number, once he caught you with a shot and had you reeling, rocking or down on the canvas, he would finish you off.
You can see him thinking, yeah, we've got a fight here, and he didn't, you know, survive and fiddle around or whatever. He just thought, yeah, well, we'll see who's the tough guy out of us two.
There are only 4 rounds of it, but it was spellbinding, compulsive viewing.
There was one point there when I was standing up, probably on my chair, maybe on my table, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people dancing. And even if they hated, they're still clapping. And then it was just little Naz. And he completely had overtaken. We'd overtaken boxing at that point.
That win over Kevin Kelly was the 9th defence of his title, and he now held the belt in 3 different divisions. But things weren't all plain sailing in the Hamed camp.
It was just harder and harder to get him to train. You know, like he'd be doing photo shoots and he'd have a million other things to do. There was just that much demand on his time. I just think he just lost sight of what it were all about. You know, like it's not like playing tennis or football. You know, like you can get beat up at this.
At that point, his brothers had taken over responsibility of planning everything, and it wasn't organised at all. So at the end, it was a bit of a circus.
I'm quite sure Naz is not going to be disloyal to his brother, but he didn't know nothing about boxing. Zero about boxing. He knew nothing about it. He didn't know what his brothers should be doing.
It's a bit like having a product like Coca-Cola. You could run it, but after 2 months, it'd probably go bankrupt because you don't know what you're doing.
Can't he just fight once a year? Well, please, I mean, you're either a fighter or you're not a fighter. You know, you can't play at it. You can't just dip in and out boxing. It's a serious business.
Well, the big bust-up, of course, was in Atlantic City, the week he fought Wayne McCulloch. He insulted the doyen, really, of boxing writers of the time, Colin Hart of The Sun, took his chair up to him and faced him, you know, this close to his face, and said, "I don't like you, Colin Hart. I call you Colin Fart."
He was insulting Colin Hart, badly insulting Colin Hart. And why I'm trying to get everybody back on track, his brother was down in New York trying to do a deal behind our backs with another promoter. And I found out about it and I got quite annoyed and I said, right, that's me, I'm done. I don't want to know anymore.
Brendan just said, you know, we're finished. It's getting too much hassle in there. The fun's gone out of it. You're not listening to what I'm telling you. You listen to everybody else and I'm not going to be part of it when it all goes wrong. And that was the end of it.
And we came home and I never spoke to him again for years. I never, ever picked the phone up to him or anything. The fight happened with McCulloch and I never, ever spoke to him again.
Without the Ingalls and Warren, Nas still kept winning. But the entrances had more spark than the fights. In 2001, he was set to fight Mexican Marco Antonio Barrera in Vegas. And this time, he had a film crew in tow.
The exec producers of that, if I'm not mistaken, was the Hamid family. Riaf was an executive producer, Nazi's brother.
It showed how ridiculous his preparations for that fight had been, really, with all the fuss going on about the colour of the gloves. Who cares?
Why is he writing on the glove? He doesn't own those damn gloves.
Something's wrong with the washing machine.
About the ring entrance. Who cares?
These are the panels, and we'll have 2 here, 2 here, and 2 up here. As he goes up, they'll go off.
This bed's 1 inch longer than the other bed.
You've got one of the great fighters in front of you. Work out how you're going to win the fight.
On the night that documentary aired, I spoke to Brendan Ingle. The moment it finished, I called Brendan. And he was at home, and he's talking to me, and he said, could you do a worse job? You couldn't.
So I want my hair to look absolutely perfect. Now that's what I call proper.
If you hated Naz so much and you had a bottomless pit, you could not have made a documentary that injured and hurt his image more than that. And they made it. The real telling point was Manny Stewart, a great trainer. He just looked sick because this great fighter who he loved, he's just seen him a week before fighting Barrera, one of the greatest Mexicans of all time. And Manny knows it's a lost cause.
So, Manny, are you happy with what you saw in there?
Not really, no.
Any gambler watching that would have pulled all his money out of everywhere and stuck it all on Barrera, as far as I'm concerned.
I think the game plan was just to go in and try and knock Barrera out because that's what Naz could do. But before you knock somebody out or down, you've got to break them down. You've got to box them.
The defeat against Barrera would never have happened had he still been with Frank Warren and had he still been with Brendan Ingle. That's as simple as that.
Sometimes if you go into a fight with a plan just to knock somebody out, it's never going to work. And I think that's where they made the mistake.
6 months later, in 2002, Hamed beat Manuel Calvo in a dreary fight and shocked everyone by retiring aged just 28. However, he finished his career with a remarkable record of 36 fights, 35 wins, 31 by knockout.
I remember thinking, it's all gone wrong. You might have the money in the bank, but it's finished now. You've lost something and you're still only, in boxing terms, a fighting baby.
I think he fell out of love with boxing at the end then, because when people say he retired at whatever age it were, an early age, but when you speak to him and they say, yeah, but we're doing it from 7, so he'd been doing it for 20 years.
He could have gone on and done, you know, what Floyd Mayweather had done. He could have been at the top of the division for a long, long time, but basically I just think it came down to that he didn't want to do it.
Like him or loathe him, he was one of the finest fighters Britain has ever produced. Despite giving it all up at such a young age, Naseem Hamed, the Prince, or just plain Naz, is still a name that certainly will never be forgotten.
He beat 11 world champions. He had 26 title fights. He won 25 for the 26. He fought in Madison Square Garden. He fought in Vegas. He filled arenas all around Great Britain. He was, I would argue, the most recognisable sportsman, not just boxer, for a couple of years.
Who would you say has been better than Naseem Hamed? It was the Britpop era. We had the best music, we had the best sports people, and we had Naseem Hamed in boxing.
He was the best featherweight out there, and for me, he's the best British featherweight that we've ever had.
Kids who are 20-year-old, if you say, you know who Prince Naseem Hamed is, they know who he is. They know Muhammad Ali, they know Mike Tyson, and they know Naz.
You've got to have somebody to share your successes with. You know, with boxers, they attract an entourage from nowhere when they're successful. And then obviously when things go wrong, people melt away, they disappear. And who'd you talk about your good times with? Was the people who you had the good times with. And that's why I think Naz wants to talk to Brendan, because they had some great time together. I mean, we're friends now and we talk quite a bit now, but it's just a shame that it ended as it did, because he deserved more than how he left the sport.
Did he underachieve? No. He's got a lovely wife, lovely kids, lovely family now. Okay, he's put on a few pounds. Who hasn't? And he's still got plenty of money. So, no, he didn't underachieve, but he could have done more, and there's a slight difference.
He gave me some of my best moments in the sport. It was a privilege to be involved with him from that point of view, and to have promoted him, and to have guided his career, and, you know, helped him get to where he got to. But he was a very special boxer.